Yes, we're back with Philip Ittner joining us from Ukraine. We couldn't see it, but I liked it. It's been quite a weekend, I have to say.
Yeah.
Philip Ittner, we're normally all your mother on my regular show and on
Okay.
the weekend because I'm genuine.
I know, but my real mother is less than 2 years underground, and that's a little
I understand.
creepy
Okay.
sometimes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We're your Aunt
It's
Betty who
okay.
thinks you're not eating. How about
It's,
this? We're
There
I
that.
you
didn't do
go.
it.
I'm down with that. I'm down with that.
We're your Aunt Johnny. And so it, on the regular, and we joke about it in this way specifically because we want to, it's just how we deal with the fact that we're genuinely nervous for you and genuinely nervous for where you are and what's going on there because we do care. And deflecting with comedy is very
I
healthy.
know.
And
Yes.
I will say that we also got to
And
be
it's appreciated.
yes, we also
They
got to be a
can't
bit
hear
of
Philip for some reason.
oh, that's their mess around. We'll be fine.
They can't hear me.
No, we can hear you. We're fine.
Oh, okay.
Johnny couldn't for a second, and that's on
No,
him.
Philip can't. I mean, CPT can't.
Can't hear Philip? Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
Huh. Why would that be?
Does that mean I'm not going out over CTP?
It does, but I'm not quite sure why. But we'll work on that right now. I will. I'm working on that behind the scenes. But on the live stream in general, Phil. First of all, how you doing? And let us know. And if we have to translate it to everybody else, we'll make it happen. But I'm going to turn off the echo cancellation just in case that's where it's going. And we'll solve it either way. Chicago, if you need to pull audio for the show from YouTube or one of those sites to get everybody, that's another option. Just throwing that out there because I know they're having issues.
I'm going to grab the audio from YouTube.
Yeah. So Phil, we were all worried in the lead up that Russia would do something on the anniversary besides just the speech that Putin gave last week. And what was it like? Was there any feel of heightened stuff, or did it come and go?
There was nobody out on the streets. I think I tweeted out the morning of the 24th. I tweeted out how empty the streets were in the center of Kiev. There was a very real concern, a lot of unease, and nothing really happened. Now, we've learned subsequently that Russia did try a couple of kind of minor attacks. By that, I mean 70, apparently some 70 attacks were stopped by Ukrainian forces, both in the air and on the ground, I believe.
Yeah.
It was very weird. It's not Russia's way of doing things.
Right.
It's very unusual for them because there's a very kind of frankly blunt, kind of unsophisticated perception of the way power is negotiated in Russia, and that is this: if you don't use it, somebody's going to come and take it from you because you're going to seem weak, and weakness is a sign for that if you are weak, then you deserve to lose what you have. That's the kind of whole mentality when it comes to power negotiations in Russia. Of course, painted with a very broad brush.
Sure.
So for them not to have done anything on that day, on that anniversary, the 1 year, marking the 1 year, I hesitate calling it an anniversary, but the 1 year mark of the beginning of this.
We need a new word
of this war.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was very weird, very strange. And I still think there's the possibility that they'll hit us with something. Now, maybe it's because their stockpiles are depleted. Maybe it's because the Ukrainian defenses are so strong that we didn't, that they tried and it failed. But I still have this. I'll be happy if I'm wrong. I'll be real happy if I'm wrong. But there's just this creeping sense in my gut that that the Russians are not going to let this anniversary or this 1 year moment in time pass without doing something. So maybe tonight or maybe sometime during the weekend. I don't know for sure. And again, if I'm wrong, great. Or if the Russians fail, also great.
Right.
But I
Well,
can't believe that they aren't going to at least try.
I agree. I mean, I think we've seen that when people have tended to misjudge Russia before, where they're like, they're not going to do anything. And this is just like the lead up to the war last year when the Biden administration, everybody was saying, yeah, this is gonna happen. And everybody was like, I don't think so. The opposite is now true. I think that the lesson of that in many ways was that everybody's concerned that like they're going to use whatever that, and that's where like when they blew up their own pipeline, you're welcome. That was, everybody thought, oh, the pipeline was blown up by the West, and therefore this is going to be the thing that's going to set off World War III, and Russia's going to use this. The fall of Kherson, the retaking of Kharkiv, every gain, every like big ticket item, not being able to take Kiev was going to be like, oh dear God, well, since they failed at Kiev, they're going to back up and just strafe bomb the place and nuke it out of existence. So everywhere along the way, there's been this idea that Russia's reaction is going to be mass murder. And there's a reason to believe that, but
they're good at it.
Yeah, right. Well, it's the one skill they seem to have accumulated over time. But at the same time, I understand everybody's nervousness about it, but at the same time, it doesn't seem to be paying off in that regard, either because they can't or because they know that the price of doing it is too high in the case of like tactical nukes or something like that. So it's not wrong to feel that way, obviously. But are we at the point where they're just not even capable of living up to their own myth?
Maybe. There's also the possibility, of course, and this is, again, we can kind of think about all the different scenarios, but maybe also because they sense that there are those out there. And I've seen in the last 48 hours or so, of course, with the rally on the Mall and then London and Berlin and all the rest of it, that maybe there is this growing war weariness. And if they were to attack Ukraine, it would be counterproductive, because then everybody who's protesting the war and aiding Russia's interests, willingly, knowingly or not, if they start bombing indiscriminately and doing
it'll
terror
draw
attacks,
attention. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So why not just let those who are, terrified of the war, are tired of the war, are disgusted with the war, and want it to end with no regard to how it ends. Maybe Russia's decided it's best not to give the, let's support Ukraine because isn't Russia awful side, which is the majority, of course.
Yeah, because that kind of strategy in a modern, in a modern society, and in the world of social media connectivity, one of the appearance is a managed part of war even more than I think any other time in history, and so a lot of what they're doing is the grind works on their behalf. Like if because people will tire of it, people will expect it to go on and on like this, and then that what drives the whole, we got to talk about this and just end this, because it seems to be a stalemate, even though real action is happening. And during this back and forth, Russia is sinking back in as far as their availability of arms, their availability of personnel. There are real impacts being made. But if they can make it look like we can do this forever, and that's the perception in a lot of places, that's they throw bodies at things. That's what they've done in the past. We can keep doing this till you're no more. And that plays into that weariness idea. Whereas in reality, I don't think they have the resources or the people to continue doing that. Nobody does. And the Wagner group fighting internally with Russia is a big part of that. We got to take a break. I want to talk a little bit about that on the other side. And then I also want to take some questions from our chat room, because I know Johnny's been farming those, and I have.
I got some.
And I can have our other separate conversation when you join me on Wednesdays, when we're talking about these things. But in the interim, it's great to be able to discuss these things, that the chat room is interested in. So we'll be back right after this. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. I mean, this is what happens anyways, because the conversation continues behind the scenes as you do. Infotainmentwars.com. We don't need the documents. We have everything memorized. Or fwank.com, FWANQ.com. So, Philip, there are a couple of questions, that that we have already. I do have a personal one that I don't know why it popped up during the break.
I just wanted to address. I wanted to address before we went to break. There was this one thing of like, the information war, the propaganda war, and the desire to see the war end. And there might come a time at some point during the fighting season, which is approaching quickly, if the Ukrainians are actually making progress in the breakaway republics in the Donbass. That's the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic. If suddenly they're the aggressors, or they're seen to be the aggressors, and certainly Crimea, which is legitimately there is a mix in Crimea. They're not all. There are a lot of full-on Russians, but also pro-Muscovite Russians,
right,
who are in Crimea. So if the imagery that we start to see is no longer brave Ukrainians defending themselves or making advances to regain ground that they had lost, if instead now they are seen as going in and taking ground that maybe doesn't necessarily want to be part of Kiev, will that also then facilitate this idea that both sides are the same? There is no good or bad. That's why I think Xi's 12-point program,
right?
His 12-step program is very, very ambiguous when it comes to recognizing territorial integrity, because from Moscow's perspective, all 4 provinces that were under a referendum, quote unquote, are now part of Russia. So does China see that as part of territorial integrity for Russia, or do they recognize that those referendums were conducted under the bayonet and aren't legitimate? So,
well, they have a problem. The blowback around, and by the way, I heard Chicago audio coming our way, and that's why I muted them. So
I did as well,
but we got it. I muted it on my side, Chicago, but we heard something coming our way. But in the meantime, this is a real problem for China, because if they start arguing that a country can, just, create these referendums, or if the West and the rest of the world fights back against the fabrication of the Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics and all that crap, that's a real problem for them with Taiwan going forward. And the U.S. deployed trainers, more of them, to Taiwan this week. So they're going to be there on the regular. We're not going to have a military base in Taiwan anytime soon, but we are going to have a constant presence of military trainers working in Taiwan, which will act as effectively human shields against Chinese, imperialist ideals on Taiwan.
Also the reason why I've run into not a few Taiwanese soldiers here in Ukraine with the Foreign Legion. So.
That's right, because they understand that it's a very similar fight to what they're going through over there. So it's a bigger conversation for a bigger time. And I think you're absolutely right that this is I don't think we see a time where I mean, we may go back to early 2014 where the little green men are there and they're like they dress them in civilian clothes and have them look like they aren't Russian fighters and Wagner mercs fighting against the Ukrainians, but they're dressed in civilian clothes, so they if they do get killed, it looks like the Ukrainians are killing civilians in the area, and that's always a difficult.
And there's also nothing to stop the Russians from just slapping on a blue or a yellow ribbon around a Russian soldier's arm and have them do something terrible, film it, and then say, put it out in the information sphere and say, it looks like those are Ukrainians conducting war crimes. They're very good at this. The Russians are. They're extremely good at manipulation. I mean, there's a reason why one of the very first terms for, in essence, gaslighting a person was called a Potemkin village, and that was, back in 60 something. They're very good at manipulating your mind and making you, think. What you're seeing is not what you're seeing. Don't worry.
Well, and that's going to get even worse. We've been looking at,
and it's going to get worse.
Anybody dives into like Midjourney or ChatGPT and all the stuff that's coming up, you are going to see a flood of phony news websites over the next year, especially, that are auto-populated with artificial garbage based on talking points that are one click and will seem to you to be written by your favorite author. Like at a certain point, you will have to run scans or question, beg your pardon, run scans or question anything you read in that regard. It's going to be a wild west as far as misinfo and disinfo over the next couple of years. And the people who are mocking, yeah, you're right. the people that are mocking that we would have a disinfo bureau in the government, get used to it, because every government is going to need one at some point. And it won't be stuff we disagree with. It will be manufactured, computer-generated propaganda from other countries, written, again, a worm on a hook. Like that will be...
I mean, there was a time, Vladimir Putin came out with a statement, I want to say about 5 years ago, where he said, whoever is best at AI will be the dominant power on the planet. I mean, Putin said that.
Yes. And by the way, unfortunately for him, it is the U.S. and it will be the U.S. Yeah. The question, though, is that the problem with it is even the second runner-up of AI can do a ton of damage, and that's what we're going to discover.
If your motivation and if the way you implement those AIs is as insidious as what the Russians do, because again, I mean, look, I'm not going to put on my pro-America rose-colored glasses just yet, but we don't do it the same way the Russians do. The Russians weaponize information in a way that's completely different than what the Americans do. America does, uses information warfare in a very, they try to get people on side. They try to, make the enemy look like a very, the worst guy. Russia just wants chaos. Russia wants weaponized chaos. You don't know what truth is. You don't know what, right, wrong, up, down. They want you in a constant state of disconnected reality. It's vicious. I have been a victim of it myself. I've had Russian disinformation campaigns used on me, and it screwed my head up for a really long time. I'm talking years, because like Mike Flynn goes to Russia and he gets told up is down, down is up, black is white. The deep conspiracies and the corporations, and don't you think this is written? Look at it this way and look at it that way. And doesn't it mean this? And if you're a thinker, you start to go, well, maybe it does. I mean, maybe and it took me a long time to go, no. I know what I'm seeing. I know that an apple is an apple, an orange is an orange, and no, you can't tell me otherwise.
Right, and that takes that's an active aspect of modern life that people are going to have to get used to, at least until there is some sort of giant AI failsafe that there's like there are computers that now, like programs or AI programs, that can tell you if something was written by an AI. And then there are AIs that can work around the algorithm that those use to trick that thing into thinking it was written by a real person. It's hilarious. And that's how it's going to be for a while.
It's the age-old battle between defense and offense,
Yep. Let's grab a question.
Taking the advantage.
We got a couple minutes. I want to at least get the question in.
You wanted to ask me, Hal? Before we go to
but we'll get to it after. Well, we'll get to it after one of these.
Sure.
Yeah. Johnny?
So from Berkeley Dowd, MSNBC aired a special highlighting Ukraine's resistance network in Kherson and how they interacted with Russian soldiers. How celebrated is the resistance over there?
I mean, I don't want to say very, I don't want to over-exaggerate it, but it is very respected and very much appreciated. Those guys are doing really brave work, because if they're found out, I mean, there's no trial, there's no nothing. That's a bullet in the back of the head. That's it. And we know that Kherson, in particular, was very active. Kherson's been tricky the entire war, because a lot of manipulation has been going on. But we do know that there were people like messing around with signposts and sneaking into the central railway station, raising up a Ukrainian flag, and calling in or getting messages to Ukrainians, Ukrainian defenses about Russian force strength and things like that. So they've done an amazing job, and they are very much appreciated and respected. The only reason I couch that is because there is this looming other thing, which is kind of a blanket a sign of respect and appreciation, and that's just the entire armed forces of Ukraine. So while these guys are kind of working as partisans, as they're working behind the lines as a kind of a guerrilla group, they're not. They are respected. There are tales being told. There are stories, and there's appreciation. But it's generally people just have this overarching thing of like, thank God that there are guys out there who are fighting in our interests, and that's just the ZSU, the Armed Forces of Ukraine. So.
Cool. Let's take a break. We'll be back right after this. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. We'll have more of the questions from the chat at infotainmentwars.com and at twitch.tv/HouseSparks and at Facebook and even in the Twitter machine. I don't know what Johnny's just spinning plates over there. We have a lot to talk about. And then I want to talk about I think the biggest under the table conversation is the growing tension between Prigozhin and Putin. I think that is the Trojan horse that exists in this thing more than any other thing. It is extraordinary and bizarre, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
You're listening to House Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I thought there was going to be like a new one every break. I was so excited.
You want more, Hal? We'll give you more. House Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820. Hoo-yah!
Welcome back to the show. So, if you're watching or listening on the YouTube channel, Philip Ittner is joining us at Philip Ittner on Twitter. He's in Kiev right now. Was just I want to get into some of the questions that I have. I think that, and we'll grab some more questions. Johnny is farming those for us with the help of our mods in the chat right now. Don't forget to support the show, patreon.com/HalSparks. If you can, if you care, if you won't, until I get a big millionaire or billionaire whale, in which case, of course, I will, they'll take their money right back because I won't change what I'm saying. Anyways, the one thing that stands out to me that I think people are glossing over is this weird fight between Yevgeny Prigozhin, who has been called Putin's chef and who is the head of the Wagner group, who has openly committed war atrocities that they brag about on their Telegram channels. This is not even a question of, the CIA is cooking up and a false flag and blah. These guys brag about the horrors that they create. They're proud of it. And this guy, apparently, the biggest problem, this came to a head over the last week. That Prigozhin believes that the Russian military is quote, mistreating Wagner forces, igniting intent, and refusing to give them enough artillery and weapons and ammunition.
Air support.
Yes, all that stuff. He accused the MOD of lying about supplying all unconventional units with requested artillery ammunition, claiming instead that Wagner forces received only 20% of the artillery ammunition promised to them. Prigozhin claimed that the MOD's statement, quote, is spitting at the Wagner private military company and an attempt to hide the MOD's crimes against fighters. This is the same week, by the way, Biden gives a speech in Poland, shows support for Kiev, shows it there, and declares that Russia is committing crimes against humanity. The language here can't be an accident. Him bringing up this crimes against fighters argument, which is just a weird thing to phrase in the first place. He goes, who achieved battlefield successes near Bakhmut. Again, this is that salami slice or Pez dispenser version of war that they carry out. Like we get paid for every yard we gain and don't have to refund any of the money when we lose it. It's the perfect money printing situation for Prigozhin and his cretins, especially when he just gets to throw prisoner conscripts at them. So is that a bigger conversation, or are people just going, when your enemy is on the ground kicking himself, in the face, chuffing. Why interrupt?
I mean, at this stage, I don't know if it's an issue between Prigozhin and Putin so
Mm-hmm.
much as it's an issue between Prigozhin and Gerasimov, the head of
Mm-hmm.
of the
The
Russian
Russian military,
military.
right?
Because Russia's army is a very weird. It's complicated. And we could go into it in depth,
Right.
but it'll take up a whole chunk of time. But let me just shorten it and say there's a weird part of the Russian military in the sense that it is massively dependent on conscripts and just numbers, sheer numbers. But there is also an elite, and there's military academies. There are guys who make it their profession. There's
Right.
an esprit de corps, and they don't like those guys, the elite, the officer corps. They don't like seeing a guy like Prigozhin rock up and grab all their glory.
Right.
So and also there's a history of this, by the way, in Russian history. Especially in times of crisis for the czar or the head, the titular head, the guy at the very, very top, Stalin during the Soviet Union, for example, he would pit his boyars, which are basically just the princes, the aristocracy, the kind of the elite. He would pit them against one another. And I think we're seeing that. I don't think Prigozhin and Putin are at each other's throats. I think Prigozhin and Gerasimov are at one another's throats, and it's Putin. Putin is happy to let that happen because he can also then elevate himself above the fray. Because there's also another thing in Russian culture where it's like, oh, all of this that's going wrong, it's clearly not the guy at the head. There's a thing called "if the czar only knew." We've talked about it in the past.
Yeah, right.
So I think Putin is trying to elevate himself above, and he might even be instigating the infighting because, again, that puts him on a higher plane. So we shall see what happens with Prigozhin. We shall see what happens with Gerasimov. But I've also seen commentators now starting. There was a video that was just released today of a woman by the name of Ksenia Sobchak, who likes to pretend to be a dissident, but she's not really. But she has fled Russia, and she had a panel between kind of hawks and doves, and they started openly like going at one another about all sorts of things. So we're starting to see cracks in Russia. We're starting to see dissent. It doesn't mean that anybody is openly saying, let's make peace with the Ukrainians, and we've been terrible to the Ukrainians. Moreover, it's basically, do we stay or do we go? And if we go, it's because of those dastardly NATO guys who seduced Ukraine away from us, and we really lost the war to NATO, not Ukraine.
Right.
Because they'll never accept that. So, but you're right.
Cool.
It's infighting, and
I feel like
I'm here for
it. So there are a bunch of mill bloggers that are grinding their teeth about this and have been for a couple of weeks as it worked its way up into the military bloggers that are pro-Russian that I'm specifically talking about, that I read and watch what they say. And it's really fascinating to pair that up with what the pro-Russia, or the anti-Ukraine, or we should just call this off, it's not important, or it's ridiculous, including Seymour Hersh. If you pair this against the internal conversations of mill bloggers, Wagner mercs, Russians who are in, soldiers who are there, and the conversations that they're having on Telegram, you can read them. This idea that Ukraine has no chance and the Russians are going to roll over everybody and it's just a matter of time and we're prolonging the inevitable, this weird storyline from last year that literally Seymour Hersh told to Russell Brand this week. He was a guest on his show and literally said, we're just prolonging the inevitable. The Ukrainians have no chance against a force like Russia. It's cartoonish and grotesque. From, by the way, a guy for all practical purposes has the most secretive connections to alleged sources that all just seem to tell him exactly what he already thinks, which is amazing.
And I'll say the same thing that I say over and over again. Get on a plane, fly to Krakow, get on a train, go
just
to the
like
border,
Biden did, right?
walk across the border, and see the Ukrainian people. All of this kind of, there's the overwhelm. I mean, like I saw Peter Zahn, who I think is it Zahn or Zehan,
Zion, yeah.
the Canadian guy from Stratfor. Have I got it around gapping? It's Sam, right? Anyhow,
Zeihan, Zion, yeah.
Yeah, Zion, who is a very good. I'm not going to diss on him. That's not the point. He's excellent in what he does. But like so many geopolitical analysts or military analysts,
right?
What they're not seeing is what I see on a daily basis, and it is an unmeasurable thing because human beings are mushy and they're not calculable. It's not quantifiable. It is not qualitative. It is quantitative. These people are motivated. They will fight. Everybody's going to fight if they have to, because it's generations stretching out into time immemorial from this point. Right. If they lose this war, they go back to being subjects of Moscow.
And that's the driving. That's the prime mover in this situation. Whereas in many ways, Russia doesn't have one. Its prime mover is this kind of artificial idea of reconstituting something that nobody really wants to reconstitute anyways, because they may want Ukraine, but they don't really want Dagestan, honestly, if they're being truthful. You know what I mean? This idea of putting the whole USSR back together is baloney. If anything, they'd rather have Norway.
Yeah. They could lose Dagestan. They could lose Chechnya. They could lose a whole bunch of stuff in their soft underbelly in that region. They wouldn't want to, because it gets more and more dangerous when it comes up against Iran, which actually is a whole other kettle of fish. They don't want to lose thing in their Far East because it comes up against China.
Right.
But Ukraine is intrinsic to their sense of identity, their sense of empire, their sense of self. It's really an important thing. I put out a vlog on the 23rd that folks who want to see my vlog on YouTube, it's just my name, one Ellen Phillip, two T's and Ittner, put out a thing about how like Ukraine is different than any other part of Russia's empire, and it is intrinsic to their sense of empire. So it's going to be all these guys who talk about like, oh, the inevitability, we're just to name the inevitability. Even the guys who are talking about like, oh, if you give them F-16s, those F-16s aren't going to be useful for another year. And they said that with the M777s, the howitzers.
Yes. They said it with HIMARS. They said it with,
And the trainers were ammo. Like, these guys are on an accelerated program of training because they are so motivated to learn every single thing that they can as quickly as they can so they can get these weapon systems online. You can't measure that. That's something that, I mean, I would argue that they would cut the training time for the F-16 by, I don't know how much, but significant percentages. So all of that talk of like, oh, just look at the numbers, crunch the numbers, and no, numbers don't work when you're willing to do what these people are willing to do. Well, because they're fighting for everything.
We have to take a break, but one of the things that is kind of an ongoing story in this that we'll talk about on the other side, and we'll take more of the questions that we have in there as well, because I feel like the show is just flying by. There's so much stuff going on. But as an example, Russian mill bloggers were pointing out that that Wagner mercs were embedding with, I think, the 51st Russian Brigade in the Donetsk region, I think. Anyways, and that Russians, they were all like gathering together. The Wagner guys were going to be with them, and then they were all going to push towards Bakhmut. And the guys in the 51st started injuring themselves on purpose so as not to go. They started like, it's a lot of foot shooting and people cutting themselves. It was just like this weird, like everybody in the unit suddenly fell down a flight of stairs. Like they were an oligarch on their way to talk to a Western journalist, and so the unit size was cut in half by themselves, and not even because of this friendly fire stuff that was going on. It is insane, and it's not part of the general conversation.
Another non-quantifiable.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It is. You can't. It's an unknown known. How is it affecting the Russian side of things? And it definitely is, because it has to play into why we didn't see a bigger attack. And there's this concern about it being right over the horizon, but that, it's that, again, the unknown knowns. All right, we'll be back right after this. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I am happy, you are happy, let us be happy together, whether the weather is cloudy or sunny. I will always be your funny honey bunny. I am lucky, you are lucky, let us get lucky together, whether the weather is cloudy or breezy. I'll be there to say, hey, come on, let's take it easy. Cause isn't it nice to have the friends that you do? And isn't it nice that the sky is so blue? And isn't it nice to say I love you, chugga chugga choo choo, woo woo. I am smiling, you are smiling, let us smile together, whether the weather is cloudy or stormy. I will still be there in the morning, I'll be right by your side in the morning, make you breakfast in the morning. I hope that you like cereal.
Yeah. These are the days. Well, and I think that song has even more meaning on the day of hate. I guess Marjorie Taylor Greene's attempted presidential campaign, where she just decided to have people be outrageously anti-Semitic and awful on the streets of America just to show their fealty to her or whatever is going on, failed miserably again. It's nice to say, here's the thing. Is there awful in the world? Of course. There's 8 billion people on this planet. There's a 20% mental illness and violent monster aspect of every society, give or take, depending on them, no matter how big or small the tribe is. So yeah, they're out there. Are they indicative of the overall mass of humans? Absolutely not. And it's really quite reassuring to me, anyways, that in countries with millions of people in them, that the people who are defending the actions of Vladimir Putin or anti-Semitism and all this stuff are pitifully small. And the real story I would like to remind everybody, and this is similar to stuff that happened a couple of years ago. Remember, there was a guy who was drawing swastikas inside with a Sharpie inside New York trains. He was just drawing them all over the place, and people were getting up and wiping them off.
Yeah.
One guy with a Sharpie does not get to define the entire society. What defines the society is the volume of people.
Take it from a guy who spent the better part of the last 20 years going war to war. I've been in over a dozen wars. Hopefully this is my last one. I have seen human beings do awful things to one another. I have also, in those same conditions, seen people do extraordinary things in aid and assistance.
It seems like wherever you go, Phil, there's a war.
So I've seen the worst of us, and I've seen the best of us.
Yeah, so leave him alone.
Causality, is not the. Yeah,
he is not the. By the way, he is not the murder she wrote. Jessica Fletcher is not the greatest mass murderer in the history of television. It doesn't work that way, Johnny.
I think she might be.
Yeah. So no.
Well, I'm just waiting for the other 3 horsemen to show up, and then off we go. So.
Right. And yet they don't come. Yeah. I see. There you go. So let's grab a couple more questions at the tail end of the show, just because we can. And what do we have there, Johnny?
Yeah, this is from Greg Edmond. Have you met Adrienne Arsenault of the CBC? She's in Ukraine now.
What's that name again?
Adrienne Arsenault.
Nope, haven't met her. I know Sarah Rainsford with the BBC. I know Stephen Rosenberg with the BBC, who was extraordinarily good. And
CBC,
Canadian. The CBC. I may have done. Yes, I may have ran into her recently. I would have to take a picture. I'd have to take a look at a picture of her. But yes, I've run into CBC crews, so I would bet you yes, I have. And she's
Google her, but
very
delete your browser history.
I used to work for the CBC occasionally when I was freelance, and it's a great organization. They let us do a thing called a rant, where we just excise everything from your brain, and they would then edit it and put it together. Wonderful organization, the CBC. Good news.
Wonderful. Got another question from Eric R. Piekarski. Asking for the guys, what's the thinking on reports that Russia's latest military jet is supposedly to be stationed? I don't know. I might have not gotten the rest of that question. Do you know what he means?
I think I do, yeah. I mean, their 5th generation fighter is an extraordinary fighter. They have really good aviation and air. Air power is, and they haven't brought it really to bear. That could change in this year. That is an advantage they have not taken yet because Ukraine's air defense systems are so good. So we'll have to see. I don't know what he's referring to when it comes to moving them to airfields. He might be referring to Belarus. We've had talks about that. But again, Lukashenko is that the issue has not changed with Lukashenko. Lukashenko cannot give full support to Putin. He cannot use his own armed forces in any kind of offensive because he has to keep them internally within Belarus. Otherwise, his own people will depose him, and he will go the way of Gaddafi. So that hasn't changed. But yeah, the Russians might put planes in Belarus, and they might bring out their best planes in this year. I don't know. Another reason to give them a 16th. The Ukrainians.
Yeah, go ahead, Johnny. Grab another.
All right, I've got another question from Jovan Hutton. Pull my finger. Could you ask Phil if Ali Velshi is as nice a guy off camera as on camera?
He's a lovely guy.
He is.
He's a lovely guy, and he's articulate and intelligent, and he unlike a lot of people in the international press corps, he's done his hard work when it comes to Ukraine, and he has a better understanding than most. Not as much as me, but he's been nice enough to let me impart some of my knowledge to him. So he's open and receptive to that. And no, he's a lovely guy, and I'm proud to call him a friend.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yep.
Ed's 3D Tech, can you ask Philip about GMLRs?
GMLRs. Is that's the rocket system, I believe.
Yeah.
Probably.
That he's referring to.
Yep. Yeah, the long range rocket.
Variation. Yeah. Yeah, it's the one that shoots up and then basically a drone comes out of the shell. Yeah, and then they're controllable and stuff. I mean, yeah, and it's longer range. It would be great. Yes, please. I mean, I made the point on Ali's show last night, and it still stands. We need to stop the incrementalism. Give them everything they need. Give it now. Let's finish this war with a victory on the ground. We'll have negotiations. We will sit down around the table, but we have to finish the war. Otherwise, Russia will just keep coming. We have to stop the incrementalism. The drip, drip, drip has got to stop. Give them everything that they ask for, short of nukes. And with limitations, if we're worried about them striking deep into Russia and some, making the Russians go nuts, we can work with them on that. But the most important thing is they need everything that we can possibly give to them, because there are hundreds of thousands of Russian conscripts, sadly. And Ukraine will only be able to combat that with better firepower.
And let's squeeze in one more quickie. Can you ask Phil if he can make a video about the farmers market that you always go to?
Sure, I will.
Yes. See, that was easy.
Bessarabsky Market is what it's called. It's named after the Bessarabsky Pass that the Russians are worried about, because it's a way into their flatland and onward into Russia. It's a lovely place. I'll go get some pickles. I'll go get some caviar, and I'll film it.
And by the way, I've eaten some of the pickles from that area because Philip was nice enough to bring me a jar all that way. And the garlic stems, the pickled garlic stems. I'm just saying, just amazing. Anyways, thanks so much, Philip Ittner. Thank you, Chicago. Thank you, Johnny Million. Love you guys. Be safe. Take care.
And we will. Thanks, everyone.
Philip, I will see you on the Wednesday stream if you'll be able to join me, and we will.
I'll be there.
Yep, we'll keep filling people in on
Good to see you, Johnny.
details.
Good
Yep,
to see
on
you,
the details as they come. Thanks so much. See you next week.